Howdy, everyone. You're listening to Blue Jeans and Boots, where genetics grad students talk about how to navigate a PhD program while trying to stay sane. We also invite faculty from our interdisciplinary program here at Texas A&M onto the show and pick their brains about research, what it's like being a principal investigator, and their journey to becoming a professor here at A&M. Today we are hosting Erin Winick Anthony. She's a maker, writer, science fashionista, and science communicator. She's the founder of science communications company STEM Power Media, which works to share the creativity in science and engineering and help others to tell their stories. Her clients include Astrolab, Hearst Media Production Company, Zero G Space Center Houston, the International Ocean Discovery Program, and more. Erin has a BS in mechanical engineering and more than 10 years' experience working as a STEM communicator. Today, we'll talk with her about navigating unconventional career paths, building a personal brand in STEM, communicating science beyond academia, and how graduate students can think strategically about careers outside the traditional professor track. My name is Veronika
And I'm Andrew Eastland.
and we will be your hosts today. Thank you so much for joining us today. We have a couple questions about your journey of becoming a science communicator. And first off, we wanted to start off with how did you decide on what you wanted to study in school, and how has that affected your career path?
Yeah, so I have a mechanical engineering degree, but obviously I'm not working as an engineer right now per se. But I've always loved making stuff. I think when I was a kid, I was make, marble runs out of paper towel rolls, and I would always make my Halloween costumes with sewing machines and stuff, which I guess you could call a sewing machine my first heavy machinery that I used, a little bit of danger involved. But when I went to college, I was debating between actually getting a degree in journalism or engineering. I was editor-in-chief of my high school paper, but like I knew I could go back to journalism a lot easier than I could go back to engineering, and I liked making stuff. So I decided, okay, I want to go the technical route. I took design and manufacturing lab when I was I think it was freshman year, and just really loved being hands-on, with all the manufacturing tools and stuff. And that really solidified me knowing that's the degree that I wanted to get.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Um, so can you tell us a bit more about the roles you have done since finishing your undergraduate studies?
Yeah, I've had a bit of a winding journey. So as mentioned, I don't work as an engineer now. I did have like four engineering internships when I was in college, but when I was graduating, I realized I liked some of what that was, but I found my niche in really enjoying explaining the engineering stuff to people. I had a couple like part-time jobs doing writing related stuff in college. I was always the one who volunteered to write the lab reports. Everyone loved having me in their lab groups. So I knew that I had something special of having like this overlap of I still loved that journalism aspect, right? Like, and of my passions. So, when I graduated, I decided not to get a full-time engineering job, and instead took a journalism internship at The Economist in their science and technology section. A lot of people that work there have like PhDs though in science, so it wasn't like, oh, I'm the only person with a STEM background. I was weirdly the only person with an engineering degree working in that area. But there was a lot of people with, backgrounds in genetics or backgrounds in like paleontology and things like that. So it kind of showed me, okay, there's a path for me here of combining these things. Because when I talked to my engineering professors, they were like, oh, if you like those two things, you can write like technical manuals. And I was like, that's not
Mm.
exactly what I'm interested in. Thank you, though. So since then, I kind of found a path through. I had that internship, which led to a reporting job at MIT Technology Review, which led to me spending 4 years at NASA for the International Space Station program, helping share the stories of science on the space station. And I left NASA about 3 years ago, and have now been running my own independent science communication company, doing SciComm for everything from lunar rover companies to going on ocean expeditions to museums and so much more.
Now, I wanted to ask a little bit more about when you realized that for you, communication was definitely kind of your lifelong route because you do
Yeah.
some internships after undergrad. That doesn't necessarily mean you're going to do this forever.
Yep.
I'm especially interested in what it was like for you to found Steam Power Media, right? Because that's a huge step. Uh,
Yeah.
what was
Totally.
that process of
Yeah.
commitment like?
Totally. It's been an evolving process, and I think I'm still figuring it out to an extent. But I think it was mainly knowing that the places I found the most joy were when I'm talking to scientists. It's being able to continue to learn and continue to go on adventures and be in the field as much as possible. I think those were the places I continue to find the most joy, so I continue to try to find more opportunities to do that. And I think there was a lot of engineers that were voicing that they didn't like to do what I do. And it was like, okay, I can help out here. This is an area that like needs some assistance, and I know I'm good at this, so I feel like I can make a difference by doing this. And it's been evolving. I mean, like I didn't do social media at all. I'm writing was really my bread and butter. I used to be very shy, and like I'm definitely like writing is where was able to find my voice originally, but the world of communications has evolved, and I have now learned a lot more about being on camera and being able to do video editing and short form versus long form and TV versus like in-person speaking, and like learned the whole gambit and found that I have varying levels of enjoyment for all of those, but that I can develop skills in all of those as well, overlapping with my STEM expertise.
That's awesome. How would like a typical day or like a typical week look like for you now?
Yeah, every week is absolutely different. I know that's an annoying answer that everyone gives, but legitimately, like I've had done two different speaking engagements this past month. I'm working on coordinating, potentially going on another ocean expedition later this year. I've flown on a number of parabolic flights and then come home and spent a month editing the video that I filmed on those. Like I go on these exciting adventures and then I usually come back and then spend a lot of time at my desk, writing, catching up on emails, editing all of the things from the exciting times when I was doing stuff. So usually I spend like a week or two doing a lot of really cool stuff, and then I hunker down for about a month, and then I go back out and do those things, intermixed with some. I live in Houston near Johnson Space Center still, so I do have some local stuff that I do sometimes related to space and science here in the community. So I don't always have to be on a plane going out to LA to do the exciting thing. Sometimes it's going down to Axiom Space right down the road or seeing some cool testing at Johnson Space Center.
That's awesome. What do you think is like one of the most valuable skills from your studies that are now being translated into what you do as a career?
I think it's definitely the ability to talk to engineers. I know that's like a weird thing to say, but like I can speak STEM, I can speak engineer in a way that develops trust with scientists and engineers that demonstrates that I'm going to tell your story correctly. I understand what you're talking about and I can be the translator between that. So I think it's learning quick and being able to speak engineer in a way that, like I said, builds that level of trust.
I am actually curious about that. For
Hmm.
speaking engineer,
Yeah.
where do you see this breakdown with other people? Maybe journalists who aren't, versed in engineering or engineers who aren't versed in communication. What kind of frustrations or mismatches do you see?
I think a lot of scientists or engineers have been, quote, burned before by like seeing a headline that just overhypes what their study actually says. They're like, that's not what this was at all, but it's the thing that that writer's editor changed it to who wasn't even involved in the story. So I think it's showcasing that you understand what the goal of their work is, and the process of the work. A lot of what I do when I'm talking with people is have conversations outside of even when I'm filming them on camera and then making them feel comfortable on camera. A lot of times when I'm like interviewing someone, I don't use the first half of the interview because they're not as comfortable. And there's a certain like getting people okay in the space to feel good to talk and feel a little bit more free, trying to keep it more casual. And also not being afraid to ask questions that, as an interviewer, might make, quote, you sound dumb, because you often have to ask the simple questions to build up to the more complicated things and kind of like showing that on ramp and helping them feel more comfortable in that space. And then using some of those simple answers to even inform your own explanations. Even if you understand a topic, they might explain it differently and can help you better explain that to the public.
What kind of what kind of social media platforms do you use to talk about science?
I try them all,
Yeah.
but because I think that's an important part of just understanding this landscape is to continue to see when new ones come up. But my most prominent ones are the ones you probably expect, which are TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and a bit of YouTube thrown in there and a bit of Threads thrown in there as well. But largely, I'm known for short form video at this point. Even though, like I said, my bread and butter is still writing and I still do a lot of writing work, but on social media, it's largely short form video.
Mm-hmm. Is there, or do you have a question?
I think it's the next question, just on our,
Yeah.
our list. But what kinds of challenges do you encounter when you're using only short form video to talk about such complicated topics?
Yeah, so it definitely is challenging to fit something in 60 to 90 seconds. You can go up to 3 minutes or whatever, but it's trying to make sure that you maintain people's attention over that whole time. I'm in like a TikTok learning program, and I've heard a lot of advice from them saying you need a
Cool.
hook every 10 to 15 seconds, which is crazy, right? Because like you often think I need a hook at the beginning and then I'm good, right? But it's like, no, you have to maintain that attention over that time. So thinking about how you structure a story such that you have something that hooks attention and then allows to explain for a minute, and then what's the next thing that's going to keep people engaged without being clickbaity and over hyping things. So figuring out how to structure your story in a way that is suitable to that format and also not feeling like you have to tell everything in that 60 to 90-second video. Because you can make a lot of different videos about a topic, and if someone's engaged and hooked, they can keep watching all of those. It could be a prompt to then go explore more deeply in a long form YouTube video or an article. So you have to understand what the kind of role of that video is, and it's probably not to explain every single detail about an entire research study.
How do you decide on what topics are you going to cover? Because like there's so
Mhm.
much new research coming out and also a lot going on in the news as well. So how do you decide on what content you have?
A few things. Sometimes it's just what interests me most, to be
Hmm.
honest. Sometimes it's what you feel like you need to share. Sometimes it's what you want to share. I have a passion for microgravity research, given all of my time at the International Space Station. So I'm often really plugged into the research that's happening in those spaces that might not be getting a bunch of attention. I don't necessarily feel the need to cover the breaking news unless it's something that I really, really care about sharing, because I know other people are going to cover that. So trying to cover the areas that I think I'm passionate about, and I know that someone else likely isn't going to make a video about. And then also things that have really strong visuals, human stories, in-person things that I can go to or have the opportunity to be able to see in person as those hooks. Because I think one of the strongest things that you can do for telling science stories is have a human story behind it. And so whenever I can get a scientist on camera who I can capture that like passion in their eyes of telling the story themselves too, that's the strongest thing you can do.
That's awesome. I like how you mentioned that you do videos that nobody else does. Like it brings out the creativity and yeah, the fact that nobody else is doing it.
Yeah, I think there's not a lot of people with a specialty in like microgravity research and or like I love engineering, I love pinball. Like what are the things that are uniquely me that no one else is going to make and also that I'm just going to have a fun time making? Because sometimes these in the world out there on social media can be depressing and difficult sometimes. So bringing the joy through the format that you feel like you best can is really fun.
It's
Mhm.
completely consistent with what you said earlier about, part of why you found that you want to be a science communicator is because a lot of people around you weren't doing that already. It was
Exactly.
a niche that you could fit into.
Yeah, exactly.
On that note of talking about, what roles your media plays in the greater landscape and also about capturing scientists on video, one of the questions we asked you or we had ready for you was about the role that researchers have, right? Because
Yeah.
we're not media professionals, we're not
Yep.
communicating all the time. What is our role in your goal? Like how do we contribute to science communication when we're in the lab all the time?
The number one thing I say to researchers and scientists is take pictures of the process. I know that it can be really distracting if you're like all heads down on the research, right? But sometimes when I come in to try to tell a scientist story or help them at the end, they're like, "Yeah, I have like three pictures taken through a microscope that were all for data." I'm like, "Awesome." But if I'm ever there in the middle of the process, just take a video around the lab to something that's not just a posed picture of everyone in the lab taken every 2 years, you know? So whenever you can, capture a moment. You don't have to focus on doing anything more than just filming, taking a picture, and you don't have to get it approved right then or post it, but just capturing those moments so that when there is a time to share, because science, there's often cycles and things you can't share along the way all the time, having that so that it's helpful in telling that story and you have those visuals to assist in that. And balancing and seeing what is your comfort zone with sharing yourself. What are things that you want to bring in other people for, whether it's pitching to journalists or other science influencers, things like that. Finding the forum that you feel comfortable with telling your own story, even if it's writing a LinkedIn post, and then using a couple of
That's
those extra
me.
visuals. There you go. Find your comfort zone. And then if you're interested in communications, expand the comfort zone slowly. You don't have to suddenly start talking down the camera to make 2-minute TikToks every other day. I think people feel like it's all or nothing, and especially communication, especially when you're just a scientist, is not paid. It's voluntary in your own free time. But the more you can advocate for yourself and share what you're doing publicly, the more likely you're going to have career advancement and new grant opportunities and things like that.
Yeah, I think people do forget about like the visuals and doing the pictures and videos.
Yes,
Especially if you're like not a type really that posts on social media, for example.
100%.
Because like I work in a lab with fruit flies, so I have a lot of pictures in my phone of just fruit flies on my microscope.
I
So
love it. Yeah.
that's awesome. You work with corn.
Yeah, I work with maize, and so a lot of my pictures are I'm in a shack and I'm sorting seed into thousands of envelopes, or I'm on a
Uh-huh.
planter in a big field.
Hey,
Um,
I think you could live stream sorting that for 2 hours and you'd have a bunch of people tune in and
oh,
asking questions.
Wait,
So,
like ASMR?
that's not a
yes,
bad idea.
exactly. There you go. And just put a
ASMR?
little text on screen that says like, this is what I'm doing, ask me anything. And who knows, maybe you'll get the $100 gift that comes in and helps fund your research. So,
Wow. That's
I would have
Hmm.
watched this. So,
Okay, okay. We'll be in contact.
that's
sounds
awesome.
good.
I do have a question more also about your storytelling, right? So
Mhm.
do you think you have to adjust the way you share your stories between like different audiences and
Mm.
also building that trust between like scientists and the general public, right? Because you did mention earlier like you do speak the engineer language, so that
Mhm.
already helps like building the trust, right?
Yeah, I would say that as much as possible, as much as your own time allows, adapting your message to platform or who you're trying to talk to is definitely ideal. I do a lot of work for clients still. It's not just all making my own work. So when I'm working with someone like Astrolab, the lunar rover company I work with, sometimes I'm more writing a post speaking to NASA. Sometimes I'm more writing a post speaking to investors or things like that. So obviously, it's going to go out publicly, but you might phrase things differently if the information is something that that group might engage with differently versus if you're throwing something out on TikTok and you're just kind of saying, anyone who engages with it will engage with it. But I think the more you can think about who would like your video, the more you can customize it as you go. It's like I just put out an engineering of pinball video this week,
Wow.
and I'm like, I know that it's going to be the pinball nerds who are my friends who are all going to engage with that first, versus the space community that also follows me. It's probably not going to be the number one consumer of that video. So maybe I can put a little extra sprinkle of pinball nerd on top of it and not have to worry about that too much. Versus if I'm trying to make something that's like, hey, you've never learned about pinball before, I start from square one. So kind of figuring out your starting point is helpful with thinking about your audience.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I definitely I'm always tempted to try and appeal to the broadest base possible, but you're right that
Sure.
it makes your communication really, I guess, flat, right? You can't start from a place where you know your audience is already on the same page.
Yeah, and sometimes the audience will find your video. If it's something that you made and didn't have an audience in mind, sometimes a very specific one will come to it that engages with it. That's how algorithms and social media work sometimes. But yeah, even if you're just thinking about, yeah, this is probably going to be people from 18 to 28, who are engaging with this, or this is largely going to be grad students, or this is a topic that probably engages to 50 plus because I'm talking about maybe Apollo history a little bit more and that sort of thing. You can customize things a little more. Or if you want it to be 18-year-olds engaging with Apollo content, how do I talk about this in a way that might appeal to them more than someone who was there to watch it happen?
Awesome. Do you What kind of tips do you have when it comes to sharing, for example, like for us, research,
Mhm.
right? So there is a lot of different audiences. but also a lot of people are skeptical, I feel like,
Mhm.
sometimes about research and science. So do you have any like tips or ways that you have overcome these types of challenges in the past?
Yeah, a couple things to hit on that I mentioned a little before, which is as much as you can, having human stories be related to it, in that people engage with people. And it's easier for someone to latch on and, appreciate what someone is doing versus when you're just talking about a scientific idea. It's different to, I don't know, have a conversation with or see a real human being that there's passion in their eyes who's super pumped about fruit flies or maize, whatever it is, to see that person of like, they dedicated their life to this. They're excited about this. So bringing that excitement to camera, you don't have to overdo it, but I know scientists have a tendency to be flat sometimes, and it feels like to be professional, I have to be very serious, but you have to bring that excitement to get someone else excited. And literally that human connection can help overcome that sometimes. And just talking about some things that other people can relate to, overlapping your research and the benefits of it with things that other people might appreciate and have encounter in their daily life is really helpful. A lot of what I worked on with NASA was a project called the Benefits for Humanity Project, which was talking about how 20 years of space station research has benefited us back here on Earth. So looking at again, human stories, everything from how a Febreze Unstoppable product was benefited from space station research to life-changing medical things. So not every science experiment obviously has a direct impact on something in their house every day, but just trying to relate it back to things that they can appreciate is really helpful.
And in your experience, does that help combat kind of skepticism or any intellectualism? Do you find
Yeah.
people are more accepting of the science when it is more personable like
Tangible.
that?
Yes. And I think it's because there's not just an immediate rebuking of like idea. It's like, okay, I'm engaging with a person here, I'm engaging with a story, and it's not just like, I know that I don't like this thing and I don't believe this thing. Um, some topics are touchier than others, of course, but especially if you're just talking about trying to showcase the value of science to get people to appreciate what you're doing when you take it out of the context of politics or religion or the where some people's belief might be coming from, it's easier for people to engage with it and digest it in a way that is new and hopefully a little bit more open.
Yeah, I've been constantly thinking about how you mentioned adding like your little own personal story and like personality when you present, especially because, I feel like I've witnessed a bunch of presentations or like seminar research where I just feel like there's not really much personality. And then from that instance, it feels hard then to like listen throughout like the 45 minutes, for example, because
Yeah.
I feel like there's not much personality and they're just like really tough research.
Yes.
So I think that's really important.
Yeah. Don't be afraid to bring in a little humor, even in a
Yeah.
serious situation, and or put those pictures from the process, up on and showcase it rather than just talk about it through a really well put together diagram is great, but showcasing it actually happening is helpful.
Yeah, I think we forget about those things. Even
Mhm.
like in the future, this is like motivating me to add more pictures from the lab as well because yes, if you do have data like that is exciting for you, but it might not be that exciting for somebody else. But if you add something a bit more personal to it, maybe that already changes the perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You might not need the hook every 15 seconds, but a hook every 5 minutes will go with. Yeah. So,
Yeah, that's awesome. This was a good point because I
yeah.
feel like throughout your PhD journey, you do have a lot of presentations and seminars you give, and it's all always about the seriousness, about the correct terminology and the correct way you describe the mechanisms and the research. But
Right.
this is just
Which is
something,
important too, but
yeah,
it's also important to remember the other part. So, the
it
communication
is.
strategies of it all.
Yeah. And I remember some very memorable seminars where there was some sort of like storytelling in the back. And like
Yeah.
maybe there was not that much research, but there was a story that went along with it and that just like really merged it together.
Yeah. I love that.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
And if that's the part that sticks with you, right? If you remember
Yeah,
the little bit of science that's associated with the story, that's a lot more useful, right?
absolutely.
It's practical directly.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was awesome advice.
Uh, so on this topic of storytelling, are there particular things that you notice scientists doing wrong when they tell their stories? You talked about staying too grounded in the ideas, but what would you say helps a scientist tell a good story when they don't know the ending yet, right?
Yeah,
We're
good.
constantly discovering the
Good point. Yeah, you're often in the middle. You don't have a beginning, middle, and end there. First of all, I'd say that I think people in science understand that, where if you're talking more publicly, there's a little bit of a lack of understanding of, well, what's the result, you know? And I think that one way to combat that is sharing more frequently, because I think people often only share the end. You know, they're like, they only share the publication. So figuring out what you can share throughout the process, because if you're giving updates, it's different than someone coming in and expecting the end. If you're talking to a scientific community, they'll understand more of, you know, where you're at in the process and that sort of thing. I would also say don't be afraid to define jargon for your audience, even if you think you're talking to a group that knows, because everyone's going to smile and nod, but there could be an undergrad, a grad, or a professor, anyone who might not have the context about your specific area. And if you want everyone to understand the importance, it's not going to be saying the big words that makes people impressed. It's going to making sure everyone's there for the whole part of the journey. So, and then also putting too much on a slide. People treat PowerPoints like posters. And so, when in doubt, more slides that you spend less time on, with less stuff on each one is my biggest advice.
That's yeah, good to know. And yeah, I agree with giving more background. Doesn't even have to be extensive background, but just
Yeah.
explaining things more. Because like we are, for example, an interdisciplinary program, so we have, research from corn to fruit flies, and
Yeah.
what he does, I have no idea, and he doesn't know what I do.
Yeah.
So yeah, just making sure that you explain even the basics in a crowd where people are scientists, but people have different backgrounds.
Yeah, it's even when you talk to astronauts, they're doing hundreds of experiments over their 6 month time on the space station, and they might have a PhD in biology, but they don't know how the heck to talk about the robotics element that they're also working on and stuff. It's like you think of these people as like the smartest people in the world, and you might not understand quantum physics, even if you're an expert in stem cells. So,
Mhm. Shifting more towards your experience at NASA, because
Mhm.
I feel like we haven't touched upon that and it sounds really interesting. So you worked in the International Space Center, right?
Space station program. Yep.
Space
Mhm.
station program. Can you tell us more about like your role there and what you were doing over the time?
Yeah, my official job title was that I was a science communication specialist, which basically means I was a storyteller for the science that was conducted on the space station. So that was largely rooted in I was an editor. The biggest thing I did was pick what we're covering because there's hundreds of experiments that happen every 6 months up there, as well as things being published from all the many years prior of research, things being launched, things coming down. So picking what we wanted to write articles about, then either writing them myself or assigning them to writers, editing those pieces, shepherding them through the extensive NASA review process to be able to get them out to the public. As well as I ran the ISS underscore research at the time Twitter account and helped make content for a number of other ISS social media accounts that was focused on science. During that time, we also got to pick up some larger projects, like I mentioned, the Benefits for Humanity project that I worked on for about 2 years. And towards the end of my time there, I also got to help scientists who are launching stuff on board, facilitate getting the stories out about their research as it was launching to media and to the public.
Very cool. How long were you there for?
I was there for about 4 years. So I started like right before COVID and then ran through 2023.
Hmm.
we've heard a little bit about this story because we were both at your presentation at the Life Science Symposium.
Mhm.
But I'm curious, what was that personal decision like to say, I'm going to leave this program and I'm going to go start?
That was my next question
Yeah.
as well.
Yeah, so I've done like freelance science communication for a long time. I'm always someone who is like, there's a cool opportunity, I want to take that. And if I can, while I'm also working my full-time job, I will. And so I've been doing that on the side for quite a while, a huge mix of things, whether it's writing articles for engineering.com or making content for my own social media pages. At the time, though, I was saying like, my own social media content was purely just a creative outlet. It's not like there's no professional focus here, except for its practice for learning how to communicate things and learning the algorithms for my other work. But I've always known that I liked entrepreneurship. I even had in college a science jewelry company that I ran. And so,
That's
like,
great.
talk about training just for the bit. I learned how to open an LLC and do business taxes and all of that stuff. So I was kind of like I get antsy and I feel like I'm stagnating and I have to do something about it. I was offered a management job at NASA for like the next step up. It would have been like managing my group that I'd worked in for 4 years. It was a big opportunity, a big pay raise, all of that. But I just was like, okay, my work on the side is also building up, so I'm getting a lot more work on my freelance side. Now's the time to make a choice. Do I want to make this jump towards my passion of entrepreneurship, or do I want to go all in and be like, okay, I'm at NASA for the next 15 years, moving up the ranks? And that didn't feel like me. I like working on a lot of different stuff. But luckily, I had been able to be pretty open with my manager about this, and I had about 4 months of wind down at NASA before I officially left, which I don't think a lot of people get. It's 2 weeks and you're gone. But I was able to train my replacement. I had time to build up my clients a little bit, apply for stuff that I could have going on the background. So when I left, I wasn't like starting from scratch. But I left April 2023, and legitimately, it was hard at the time. It was definitely like a really hard day turning in my badge, but I feel so happy doing what I do now. And you sometimes just find the things that fit what you do. And I'm not going to do this forever, but right now, this is right. And I'm excited to see how it continues to grow in different directions and what other adventures can come my way.
Yeah, awesome. I mean, you're clearly doing very well and very happy, so
Thanks.
obviously it was a good decision.
Yeah, like I said, you never know what's going to come, and there's definitely a lot of risk and uncertainty. And I've, got to pay for my own healthcare and pay estimated quarterly taxes. Like those are all things that happen too, which aren't the best, but it's all a balance. And I enjoy just being able to be like, all right, let's put out a bunch of applications and see what new things come in this year and
Yeah.
what new adventures can come from this. And everything's a stepping stone, builds onto the next thing.
A quick related question. On your
Mhm.
website, you talk a lot about we and us for Steam Power Media. Who
Yeah.
all is on your team? It sounds like it's not just you, but I don't know how big the
Yeah.
operation is.
Good question. So I am the only like full-time employee, but I have a lot of contractors.
Okay.
So when I bring in like a large client, for example, I worked with an educational video company last year, and they were like, "We have this big project." It was awesome. Let me tap my Rolodex here, and I'm able to bring in, 5 script writers, 2 other hosts, that sort of thing. So it's a lot of people that are kind of like on my list of that I can manage the project and then bring in these people that I know are going to do a good job with it. But yeah, I'm the only full-time employee, and I've thought about expanding, and I had the opportunity to, but there's something about being technically your own, just one single person that allows you to have the flexibility right now.
Mhm.
So I'm kind of enjoying living in that space, but there's definitely potential to expand more into other part and full-time stuff in the future.
You also shared with us that you are passionate about microgravity. Can
Yes.
you talk more about what that is and how did you find this passion?
Yeah, so I really like people associate me with space now, which I mean like
Mm-hmm.
fair enough. I'm surrounded by space stuff as we're talking on the Zoom call. But like my passion is really science, and when I worked for the space station program, the focus was all on most of the experiments on the space station are related to the microgravity environment. There's a few things that are related to, the perspective looking back at Earth or like radiation exposure and things like that. But like I'd say like 85% are all related to the special things that microgravity can help us learn, whether it's combustion research because flames burn as spheres in space, or drug related research because protein crystals that you grow for drug development become much cleaner in space, allowing you to develop very cool different drug technologies. So, the reason I'm so passionate about it is because I feel like it's one of the ways that really does enable so much to help us on Earth. It's not just about exploring for the sake of exploring, which is also cool in space, but like legitimately, we are learning so much by removing this cloud of gravity that's on every other science experiment that we do here on Earth. So the space station is the only place we can do long duration microgravity research right now. I've gotten to fly on some parabolic flights that have short-term microgravity, which is 20 to 30 seconds, about 30 times over the course of a flight, which is really great for prepping things for space, allowing scientists to be able to be the hands working on their experiments rather than having to write out long procedures. to be able to do in space. And then we also have drop towers, which are more like 4 to 6 seconds, just dropping something in a big tower and allowing it to free fall here on Earth.
Like an amusement park ride? Just
Basically, yeah, that you load
Nice.
your experiment into. Yeah, so
whoa.
You did some videos, right, from the spaces with the
The
microgravity.
the parabolic
yes.
flights.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, so I've flown on 6 parabolic flights now. So I worked with Zero G because they were trying to focus on showcasing, like, really the big point of what we do is research, but people often think of it as just like a fun plane ride to go on and that you have to pay a fair amount of money to go on. But like, no, it's like really, they can make lunar gravity, Martian gravity, and microgravity on board so we can prep technologies for all of these different areas and learn stuff about these environments without actually going there because it might not be cheap to put stuff on this plane, but it's a lot cheaper than launching it to the moon. So I've trying to make points about like, here's some of the research we're doing so people have an understanding of the value of these flights in addition to space research.
Yeah, these types of videos have to be like one take, right? Because
Yes, I've gotten better at them.
that's awesome.
So they normally we have a shot list for every parabola of the flight, and so typically I allocate myself a number of parabolas to accomplish each video. And if I finish early, awesome. And then we have bonus ones at the end where I can film myself flipping and having fun, which is,
Yeah.
the payoff rather than just being focused on delivering my lines or whatever. I've done some demos on board too. So like, the one slime and microgravity for kids and then like, there's a famous thing where you spin a T handle in microgravity and it flips directions, which is like a really cool physics thing. It's called the tennis racket theorem, and Veritasium has a fantastic long form video on it if you want to watch. But doing demos, doing all these different, delivering scripts to camera, as well as, recording all these different researchers doing all of their cool stuff on board.
Awesome. I mean, you also have another passion, which is ocean expeditions.
I
Yes.
thought you were going to talk about pinball.
Pinball. Oh my God, you
That
have so
too.
many passions.
I have a lot of things
Well,
that I do.
first,
Yes.
I wanted to know more about the ocean expeditions because that is also a
Yeah.
very uncommon thing to be part of. So what is your role when you go on these expeditions?
Yeah, I the main thing is I love exploration and being up close to science. And that's one of the things that ocean exploration has very in common with space. And so I mainly am like an outreach officer on board. It's the best way I can describe it. So a lot of people that are funded by grants have an outreach clause like in them that they're required to do outreach related to their research. And the way that a number of these ocean expeditions work is that they bring an outreach officer or two on board to be able to share the science of the expedition, and that is their whole focus. And it's usually funded by these grants too, because that's like a component of it. So I sailed on two different ships now. The first one was the Joides Resolution, which was the geology focused ship. Though specifically the expedition I was on was taking rocks from beneath the seafloor that helped us learn about Earth's past climate. And that was a 10-week expedition. Yes, did
Wow.
not touch land for 10 weeks, and that was a crazy life experience. And then I've also been on the EV Nautilus on a seafloor mapping expedition. And so that one was, quote, only a month in comparison. But the first one, it's largely doing what I do when I'm not at sea, of making videos, writing blogs, interviewing scientists. We do a lot of tours or like live ship to shore calls with classrooms and different organizations all around the world, which is very fun to just, throughout the day suddenly call into a second grade Colorado classroom. And then you're talking to, someone in England and a physics classroom and stuff, and be able to share the message more directly in addition to kind of disseminating it online. Nautilus is unique in the fact that it has live broadcasting of its remotely operated vehicle dives as well. So you basically sit as a commentator on console to commentate what's happening during the dives as they're live broadcast around the world. My past expedition, they didn't have those dives during mine because it was only mapping focused, but that's usually another big job of the outreach officers.
That's awesome. Okay, yes, I have it. Can you share with us how did you get involved in going on ocean expeditions? Because it sounds like it's a very different area. I mean, you did say that given you had a lot of experience around like space and ocean,
Mhm.
it's kind of it translates, but still, how did you get involved in this area?
Yeah, so when I left NASA, one of the biggest things that I was looking for was ways to be closer to the science. Because if I knew I was leaving and working from home, that could make you further from the science, right? Not that I was, getting to go to space or anything when I was at NASA, but I applied for these have all been actually through like formal application processes. It's nothing like I've pitched someone and they've accepted me on. They have often what's called calls to sale or they have like fellowship applications. So I applied, I think, to the Joides resolution one like October 2022 and then sailed in like December of 2023. So there was like a long time horizon there because I was sailing at the like end of the expedition season and they usually have applications before the start of an expedition season. You can apply, go through an interview process. They accept people who get assigned over the course of it, and you have to go through training related to the ship and the tasks you'll be doing. And Nautilus, you can apply to be a science communication fellow. It's for formal and informal educators. I am in the informal category. So you'll often sail with people who work at museums, zoos, as well as that are like K through 12 educators that are doing this too. All of them have a very different focus, right, when you're on board, but you come in and do similar tasks and then are able to share the message with your audience in different ways. So basically, science communication fellowships or outreach officer positions on board, as well as looking at general calls to sail on these different ships.
Awesome. So I guess lastly, I did want to ask about your pinball passion as
Sure.
well.
Yes.
If you could share with us, how did you start your pinball career?
Yeah, I guess you could say it started playing like the Windows XP Space Cadet pinball for free on my parents' home computer when I was a kid. I think that's where it officially started. Yeah. So I wasn't like I was like growing up playing pinball all the time, but I think that was like most of our exposure to it. I also played like pinball at the local diner. We had like a hot dog shop that had like one machine called Fun House. There's like a guy named Rudy in it that's horrible and I still hate him. He's like just yells mean things at you while you play. But that was my like childhood in-person pinball machine. But coming out of COVID, I found out there was like a pretty crazy, great pinball scene here in Houston. And it's just really welcoming, awesome people that often have an appreciation for like mechanical stuff, like
Mhm.
in making, like people are maintaining these machines from the 50s and making them still playable, as well as there's a competitive outlet and like it's just fun. And it's pretty cool. Now I've been playing for competitively for about 3 years. And because I've just found a great community here in Houston that all loves doing it. There's a women's pinball league called the Bells and Chimes. I've played in the state championships. I now own two pinball machines. I'm
Oh,
fully
wow.
in. And I love it. Like I said, a competitive outlet, it gets you away from screens while also being like a cool mechanical piece of history. And yeah, just a lot of fun people that do it.
That's so cool.
Could I ask one more question?
Yeah.
I'm really curious who your inspirations for science communication are. Who do
hmm
you really look up to? Who inspired you to go down this path? Um, I guess maybe some historical ones from when you were first making this decision, and then who's on
Yeah.
the scene right now that you really look up to?
Yeah. Well, I'd say like the things that like when I was exposed to as a kid were the traditional Bill Nye, Neil deGrasse Tyson, Mythbusters. I throw Miss Frizzle in there too. But then like seeing that this was like a career that I could actually take, I'd shout out Emily Calandrelli for sure as like a big one. She's known as the Space Gal online. She has now flown to space, has had a Netflix show, does some really cool YouTube content, New York Times bestsellers. But there's a whole community of people that do this like not in a famous context, like there's people that have similar to me number of followers on social media, but do work for other people. Alex Danis, I'm a huge fan of. She has a PhD in genetics. She just had a huge series that I loved, taste testing every amino acid, which was just like a
Wow.
very fun way to engage with talking about what these things are. And she has some incredible video editing. Maynard, the hip hop science MD, he again crossing like another interest with science and space to be able to engage a different group of people. They all do some great work. Science Sam has a PhD in neuroscience. And again, it's very cool to see people from all these different niches and how they engage with science communication through the different things that they're skilled at.
Yeah, so your journey has been very diverse. So what do you think has been the most rewarding moment from your path?
Um, uh, you know, I think it probably has to be flying on my first microgravity flight
Mm,
because I had worked
yeah.
for on microgravity research stuff for 4 years. And Zero G had reached out to me like out of the blue, their marketing director, and was like, "Hey, do you want to like come meet? We're in town, just to, like chat." And then after the end of the meeting, he was like, "Do you want to fly tomorrow?"
Do you
I
want
was
to
like,
fly? That's awesome.
yeah, yeah, I do. That sounds awesome. So it was a complete surprise, but it also felt like a fully full circle moment.
Mm,
They were bringing me on the first one, like no strings attached, just come on board. I didn't have to make anything because they were partially, I think they were testing to make sure I was going to feel okay for a flight
yeah.
that was going to be twice as long, and I could like deliver, and then also just to like start that relationship. But feeling that and just being able to have fun in the environment and like being like, okay, this just feels like the moment that is the peak of all of this, and I hope I get to do more, who knows, but it really felt like, okay, yeah, I've made it. This who knows where it goes from here, but I've definitely peaked.
What type of advice would you give to students who are pursuing a career in STEM? So maybe even like what type of advice would you give your younger self after you finished your undergraduate studies?
Think about how what you like to do intersects with STEM. You don't make sure to be self-aware and thinking about the things that you are enjoying in the process and not just keep going down the path of least resistance. Think about what you really love, and continue to self-reflect every 6 months because it can be, especially getting a PhD can be a very long process.
Yeah.
Make sure you are continuing down a path that you're continuing to enjoy even during those tough times. And also just keep sharing your journey. As much as possible, be open and honest with the people around you and or sharing online too, but tell people about your goals, tell people about the things that you really want to achieve, because hopefully you've surrounded yourself with people that will want to help you achieve them too.
Lovely.
Wonderful.
Awesome advice. Do you have any more questions?
I think that's it.
I think this
Amazing.
was awesome.
Yeah, this is wonderful.
No,
Thank
so
you
great to
so
talk to y'all. I
much.
appreciate the invite, and yeah, hopefully I can make it back up to TAMU at sometime soon.
Be
Absolutely. We
great to
would
see you.
love to have you here. Thank you so much.
Yeah, sure thing.
Today's episode was hosted by Veronika Mojic and Andrew Eastland and produced by Charles Mitchell. This podcast is brought to you by the Texas A&M University Interdisciplinary Graduate Program in Genetics and Genomics. If you have any questions about our program here at A&M, please feel free to email us at bluejeansandboots@gmail.com. You can also find us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and X. Thank you for listening. We'll hope you'll tune in next time.